Yang Bahagia Dato Madina binti Muhammad, Secretary General MOSTI, Yang Bahagia Dato Dr. Sarifah Zara, Deputy Secretary General MOSTI, Dr. Raslan Ahmad, CEO Yayasan Inovasi Malaysia, Encik Muhammad Azib Datuk Mustafa, COO Yayasan Inovasi Malaysia, Tan Sri Datuk, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. I feel honored, actually, lucky to be here because I'm not a politician. And Max actually asked me whether I could stand in for him because he's very busy, like most of them, in the election campaign. So they couldn't find anyone that is not engaged. So there you are. You have no choice but to have me today. I actually want to talk about the subject, innovation and transformation in the context, because our Prime Minister has said we must transform this country so that we can become a developed nation with high income, and so that by the year 2020, we will make everybody in this country happy, as we have envisaged under Vision 2020. So when we talk about innovation, we need to put it in context of that transformation so that we can achieve what is clearly stated out in this forum, the idea of towards an innovative society and high-income advanced economy. So I will now posit the discussion in the context of that. I've got a couple of slides. I understand from the organizers I have 1 hour, so you have to bear with me. Some of you didn't have coffee. I hope today I will give you the caffeine in this discussion. I got a couple of points on innovation. The first one, you're going to click. The first one is about the 4 elements of innovation, to my mind. The first one, when you want to talk about innovation, you must have a customer that wants that product or that service that you're granting. When you have to have a customer need for it. Sometimes the customer doesn't know that they need it. If the customer doesn't know that they need it, you create that need, okay? Sometimes they don't know. Remember, the whole world when we were born, the whole world when we started, nobody knew there is such a drink as Coca-Cola. The people in the caves, they never drank Coca-Cola. But suddenly the guys created this drink, put a lot of sugar in it, and then made everybody said, this is the real thing. And when they say it's the real thing, the presumption is other things are not real. And so therefore they created the need. How many tablespoons of sugar is in 1 can of Coke? 7 tablespoons of sugar. But they created the need, so you create that need. The first point, when you create the need, or when the need was already there that you're fulfilling it, you actually must translate the product or the service that you innovate so that it has a commercial value. Because someone has to pay for it. Because if they don't pay for it, the innovator is the one that loses money. So therefore, all innovation must have a commercial value that the customers will need to pay. And the third one is that, you go back to the earlier slide, please. The third one is that it must be done by the people in the workplace. This is so important. So whilst we talk here in the room here about innovation, we read about in the books, innovation actually takes place when the people in the workplace actually do it. It's not done by some people sitting somewhere in an ivory tower in a corporate center figuring out how to do it. So the folks in Apple, the people in Apple sit down and come up with iPad. They innovate it there in the company. That's where the innovation takes place. And the output of this innovation leads to 3 things, which is the 4th point there. It leads to 1, an invention. 2, it's a novel application. Or 3, novel ways of doing things. So I'm going to talk about these 4 things one by one so that you have a general idea before I talk about transformation. First point, innovation related to customer need as I described before. First, customers, you need to identify who might want this innovation. You recall in 1980, I tell you the story. I was a student sent to Japan at that time on a summer school. I was in Japan, Sophia University in 1980 when they first released the Walkman. Some of you know my age at that time. Huh? Some of you know Walkman, remember? In 1980, it was released. I was in Japan at that time. The idea of the Walkman, when it came about, was they said there are people who want to listen to music while they're on the move. So that's the customer segment. People who would like to listen to music while on the move. So when you think about it, that is a huge number of people that would like to listen to music while on the move. So once you identify that segment, you then create the product. So they created the Walkman. So that's the real function behind it. It's very nice, actually. I bought my first Walkman. I'm convinced in 1980, I believe I was the first Malaysian to have brought the first Walkman into the country. I was convinced, actually. Because it was just released. I finished my summer school. When I came back, I was the only person in USM walking around with that Walkman. And you know what happened was this. It wasn't just a product that had the functional or real benefit. It was a product that has a huge perceived benefit. What was the perceived benefit in branding? It was hip to carry a Walkman. Hip. It was hip to carry a Walkman. So all the young people suddenly need to have this Walkman. And so therefore, it needs to have a unique proposition. Unique proposition means they were the only one that had the product. And the uniqueness, something, if somebody else has the product, maybe what's unique, yours is the lightest. And it has a very good, so the uniqueness of what you offer in terms of innovation must be there. Remember though, when you create an innovation, every innovation cannot do everything. So the element of trade-off is there. You never pretend that every product that you innovate can do everything for mankind. So the trade-off must be clear. So you now must know what are you innovating, for whom are you innovating, what are the distinctive product and characteristics of that innovation. You must know what it is not giving to the customer. That's the concept of trade-off. You know why that's important? Because of the last point on my slide about pricing. When you want to charge someone, how much do you charge them? It's on the basis of what functional benefits are you giving, what you're not giving, and therefore on the basis of that, you come with the appropriate pricing. Sometimes the pricing can be very high if you can put a premium around the branding aspect of that, much greater than the function. The French, I think, they really have mastered the art of doing this in terms of wine and perfume. I mean, when you think about perfume, I mean, perfume is a normal thing. It cannot cost so much money, man. But, you know, there are some perfume that are very expensive. You just put a couple of things that has certain scent. But then if you can talk and talk around it, people will buy it. The branding, the perceived value is very important. The fourth element was called reasons to believe. Every claim on your innovation, you must have the substantive reasons for them to believe your claim. They must experience it. You must prove it categorically in the labs where you are doing the tests that what you claim to be the distinctive benefit of your product must be real. So the reasons to believe. Let me now talk about commercial value. 3 points I want to mention here. The first one is you must translate the innovation so that it reaches the point in a customer value proposition. The chart that I put before is what I call the template to derive what is the customer value proposition. Target customer, distinctiveness of your offer, reasons to believe, and then the reasons to believe and the trade-off where you don't grant, and the pricing structure. That is the template for deriving the customer value proposition so that you can monetize it. Having now gone through the process of monetizing this, then as I said, the pricing is important. Pricing deals with the uniqueness of the product relative to the competition. And then lastly, you may want to put an IP. Intellectual property rights are very important because they're used to retain the commercial value associated with that particular innovation so that it is kept within the company. Some people are not so good in the last bit. They make a lot of money quickly because they failed to put up the IP, and suddenly the leaks get out. Of course, not to mention those who copy and they don't follow IP laws. Let me say this. IP is a complicated process because you can put an intellectual property rights over physical property of your innovation. You can also put IP rights over processes related to that innovation. Believe you me, you can also processes. I know of companies that have sued other companies. They have not even produced the product. But they said, we have filed IP rights over the process of doing the product. Although we cannot produce the product, you have produced the product using our process. So you can file suits on that too. So I can go on and on about this. I worked a long time in Shell. We defended cases in Shell where people sued the company over issues associated with processes. They do not know how to produce the product, but they claim in their IP claims that they actually put up first the process of doing it. But of course, Shell won lah. But the issue I'm making here is that IP is a very important component of what we call keeping the commercial value within the organization. Third point, I made the comment before, innovation involves people in the workplace. I gave the example earlier on. Innovation needs to take place in the universities, needs to take place in the research institutes, amongst those people there. It needs to take place in labs, in incubators. It needs to take place in organization, in companies. All the companies, they need to start to innovate. NGOs, private organizations, communities. So as I said, I gave example of Apple, Samsung, and others. It needs to happen there. Let me talk about the fourth point. Fourth point, there are only three in my mind outcomes of innovation. The first one is inventions. Some of you might have read Ivan Illich. Have you read the book called De-Schooling Society? That shows my age. The older people have read his book. Ivan Illich says we must not go to universities. We don't go to existing schools because he reckons most of the inventions are already tapped out from the existing disciplines. Therefore, we need to do other things. I remember I went to a conference like this with Shahid. There was one chap, and I tell you this story. He asked Shahid and I, Shahid is over there, he worked for me. He said, can you guys give me one of those fork, metal fork? So he held the fork in his hands. He asked Shahid to turn it. He cannot because it's very hard. Then the guy said, the Chinese bloke, and this time last year, by the way, he did the demo at an innovation conference. So he then said, Shahid, I'm going to look at the fork in your hand. I'm going to bend it, he said. This guy is from Kuala Lumpur. Then immediately he bent it by looking at it, that fork. Then he asked Shahid to hold that fork, the sharp parts of the fork. And he said, if you use your hand to turn it around, I will put my powers through your hand and it will be turned. And the guy actually using him turned it around. And by the way, that fork is still in his office today. Very hard like this one. Can you imagine if we had asked every Malaysian to study the science of turning that? We don't need hammer like in future. Everybody can do that. Can you imagine there are new disciplines that actually exist out there? So innovation actually exists when we start thinking outside the box and start to think about this invention. So you think about aeroplanes was invented by the Wright brothers. It's a long time ago. Telephone was invented by Alexander Graham Bell. Subsequently, the second output of innovation is this idea of application. It can be in the